Hey everybody, welcome to Cinema Trip Reviews. Today on the show we're going to be talking about The Matrix. Welcome to Cinema Trip Reviews. Today I have special guest Brett Parker from Dissect That Film. How you doing today, Brett?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
I'm doing fantastic, especially since we're talking about The Matrix today. Before we get started, why don't you tell everybody about yourself, man?
So I am Brett Parker. I am the host of the Dissect That Film podcast, where where myself and my wonderful co-host Dan and Angela of DNA Gaming, we talk about movies. We break down plots. We dissect. I say that in air quotes because we call ourselves Dissect That Film, but sometimes it doesn't happen. But we just break down plots of movies. We we throw in some behind the scene facts, and we try to make it as humorous as possible, to put the smiles on people's faces.
Yeah, I mean that's what it's all about, man. Just movies and making people happy.
Yes.
But of course today we're talking about the 1999 film The Matrix. Kind of a revolutionary film at the time, man. It sparked the movement of just like bullet time. It invented bullet time, which we've seen through many assets of media like video games and other movies since then. And it also sparked that little area of time where everything was just black, like all dressed in black with sunglasses and leather and looking cool. And you really saw that going forward at that point, maybe for like the next 4 or 5 years afterwards. It's happened maybe a little bit before, because I think Blade came out like a year or two before this. But man, The Matrix is really what started that look going forward in like action movies.
Oh yeah, the black leather, baby.
Yeah, the black leather and sunglasses, and then like just the slow motion bullet time stuff. But this movie, of course, was created and directed by the Wachowski sisters, Lana and Lily Wachowski, who went on to make like V for Vendetta, Speed Racer, which is one I haven't really seen, but Cloud Atlas.
It's a trip. It's a trip.
Is it? I know Cloud Atlas was. I really liked that movie when it came out. But I did dig V for Vendetta, but I really like the graphic novel a little bit more than what they did with the movie there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like Cloud Atlas. They didn't really do anything together after that point. I think it was Lily that came back and did Matrix Resurrections a couple years ago now.
Didn't they do Jupiter Rising or something like that? There was a movie with
I think they produced it or wrote it. I don't
Channing
know if they
Tatum.
I don't think they directed it, but I think they produced it and wrote it. But I know one of the sisters came back and made the Matrix Resurrections movie. They both didn't collaborate on that one. Very mixed bag with that movie. I don't know if you.
From what I've heard.
Oh, you haven't seen it?
To be honest, this is the only one I've ever seen.
Oh, for real?
And then watching it today before being on this show is the first time I had seen it since I was probably like 11 or 12. So it's been about 20 years. Yeah.
Awesome. So I mean, it works out perfectly, because really, what we're going to be talking about, other than breaking down the movie, is does the Matrix still hold up today, all these years later? A lot of the subject matter, I think it's been talked about a lot more today than it was back in whenever it came out, like as far as like living in a simulation. I feel like the sequels definitely are mixed. A lot of people don't like Matrix Revolutions and Reloaded. I like the second one decent amount. I wouldn't say it's nearly on par with this one, but the third one lost me at that point, and then the Resurrection one that just came out just really wasn't needed. But yeah, depending on how this one goes, if you're down to watch the other ones eventually, maybe we can move on and do like Reloaded and Resurrections or whatever down the line, but we got to get through this one here first. But that's crazy, I haven't seen this one since like around it came out, you said.
Yeah, it's been probably almost 20 years since I've seen this movie, and wow. I just remember I think seeing it at that age, I think just very confused in what I was watching. And so like when I watched it and I was probably just like, I didn't really like this, and I moved on. And so when the sequels came out, I know the sequels came out like the same year.
Yeah, they filmed them back to back. and
Yeah,
they released one at the beginning of the year. I'm pretty sure, I forget what year it was, but then
2003,
they released,
I believe.
yeah, and then they released Reloaded was the second one, and then Revolutions came out like the end of that year. So yeah, it was all in one year, which is very odd. And they have a very different feel than this first one too. I think this first one, they really hit the nail on the head with this one. They captured it perfectly, but they kind of went away from everything they set up in this one and the next two. But we won't talk about those. But like you were saying, this one, when I was younger, before I even saw this, that was pretty much the general consensus was it's a confusing movie. You have to watch it more than once to even get it. And as a kid, when you're watching it, obviously there's a lot of stuff you don't pick up on, and it is very confusing. Whereas even watching it all these times and even up till now, there's still stuff I kind of pick up on going through the movie. But overall, I kind of got a general feel of how everything plays out and what it's trying to portray in the movie itself.
Yeah, I definitely felt the same.
But yeah, just kind of some quick notes about the movie. Apparently, it started out as a comic book concept because the Wachowski sisters actually wrote for Marvel a little bit before they actually became like screenwriters and ended up becoming directors. And it feels like a comic book in a way. It would definitely translate to a comic medium if they decided to do that instead of making the actual movies. It's one of those things, if it was a comic, you can see it easily adapted into a movie, like, say, nowadays with how comic book adaptations are.
Right.
And as far as, like, casting, famously, apparently Will Smith was offered the role of Neo at the time, and he turned it down.
For Wild Wild West.
Yeah, for Wild Wild West, which is critically panned and hated, but as a kid, I loved Wild Wild West, so that nostalgia has always been with me. I actually recently rewatched it a couple weeks ago, and I still enjoy it.
I think so. The reasoning behind him taking Wild Wild West is because Barry Sonnenfeld was the director, and that was his director from Men in Black. So I felt like he was just he was like, this new thing that I don't know how it's going to go or work with somebody I've worked with before. Yeah. And then I guess the whole story is he saw it in theaters and was like, oh.
I mean, I could definitely see that. And like you're saying, it definitely would seem like the more safe approach, going with a director you worked before, as you know, going with unknown screenwriters turning directors for a big kind of a sci-fi blockbuster movie. You have no idea what it's going to be. And he kind of ended up having a similar situation down the line, because he was supposed to be up for the role of Django in Tarantino's Django Unchained, and he ended up turning that down. Right. Where it's like, I'm sure after that he was like, damn, I probably should have took that
down
movie.
Tarantino.
Right.
I understand turning down new directors, people who don't really have any background. I feel like that's probably an easier choice to be like, yeah, I'll probably just kind of step away from that. But to turn down Tarantino,
right, out of all people, man. Like, he like every couple years he'll release a movie, if that. It's not very often you get a Tarantino movie nowadays where it's like, if you get that chance, you got to take it, man. You got to grasp it. But apparently Will Smith and Nicolas Cage was offered a role apparently for Neo, and he turned it down as well. Which I don't know how that would have worked out if it was Nicolas Cage.
But I mean, that's what people thought about Keanu Reeves, because when Keanu Reeves was cast, I mean, he had done movies. I mean, he did Speed. I think Point Break was before this.
Yeah, Bill and Ted and stuff.
But that's what people's mind was like. Oh, the guy from Bill and Ted's gonna be in this movie. Like, oh boy, like.
Yeah, I mean, even I had like they threw the woes in there too. Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa. And apparently Sean Connery and Samuel L. Jackson were up for the roles of Morpheus. Apparently Sean Connery turned it down because he just simply didn't understand the script. He was like, I heard no
Val
idea
Kilmer too was in there too, was up for that.
Yeah, I read that as well. The big names that kept coming up as I was looking into it was always Sean Connery and Samuel L. Jackson, which, man, Samuel L. Jackson would have been wild as Morpheus.
I feel like he would have been awesome.
He would have been awesome in this role. But I mean, Lawrence Fishburne in the role, he killed it, man. Just the way, just his whole demeanor and how he portrayed that character. It was just so realistic. Like he just brought something to that character. I don't know if that's Samuel L. Jackson or anybody else could have brought to it,
Yeah.
And like we mentioned, the movie was pretty much what invented bullet time. They were like the first ones who really, I think it was like 260 or 300 cameras set up in like a circle along with the film cameras, and they just shot it all at once, kind of spinning around. They spliced it all together. And apparently WB gave the Wachowskis $10 million at first to make the movie, and they spent all $10 million just to make the opening sequence to show WB, and then that convinced WB to be like, all right, we'll give you the rest of the money. Because apparently they wanted $80 million to start out, and they're like, no, we're going to give you $10 million.
Whoa.
And they went out and shot that opening sequence apparently with Trinity, and that apparently blew Warner Brothers away. So like, all right, we'll give you the rest of the money. And then the rest was history. And then they gave them, just leeway to make 2 direct sequels right away, film them back to back.
Right.
So it really blew everybody's socks off at that point. But as the cast, you got Keanu Reeves, of course, Lawrence Fishburne, which we mentioned, Carrie-Anne Moss, who was great in this movie, Hugo Weaving, which you see a lot of, and he really chews up the scenery as Agent Smith as well. And then you got Joey Pantoliano. I don't even know if I pronounced it correctly, so I'm just going to be calling him Joey Pants or Cypher from now on. But those were the main actors in the movie.
This movie, watching it for the first time in 20 years, I was like blown away. I'm like, holy crap! Like, this movie does not look like it came out. I mean, there are shots and visual effects stuff that kind of didn't age well, but I mean, it's 1999. I feel like you can't judge it too much based on that.
Yeah,
they were
true.
Also experimenting with things that had never been done on film. So, but this movie rocks.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, other than like what you're saying with some of the CGI and some of the earlier stuff they were just experimenting with at that time, it was a very well-made movie. Overall, just like the cinematography at all, just the way it was written, the way it was paced. It was paced extremely well for just over a little over 2-hour runtime. It goes by like nothing. And I noticed as I was watching it last night through my rewatch, is instead of just throwing all this, backstory and exposition in one scene, they kind of spread it out through like these smaller scenes just in the middle of the film, kind of with Morpheus and Keanu Reeves and these certain little areas, which we'll get to. But it's extremely well paced, and like you were saying, it's an extremely well made movie, which I think you can definitely, it's being the 90s, you can excuse some of the visual effects in it. Now a note is I did watch this I got the 4K Blu-rays that came out. When this movie was released, they made it so when they're in the Matrix, it's kind of color graded a green tint over the scenes. And then when they're in the real world, it's kind of like a bluish tint. Whereas in the 4K, they actually went in and they removed the tints altogether. So everything's just shot normally, which I actually kind of enjoy a little bit more than the actual tints. I was never a big fan of the tints throughout the scenes.
Yeah, I watched it on HBO Max, which I believe they just do a 4K transfer. And,
okay, so
because I don't remember seeing the tints. Yeah.
Oh yeah, you would have noticed it if it was on there, because it's very noticeable, like green, like a green haze over every Matrix scene.
I remember playing Enter the Matrix for the PlayStation 2 when I was a kid. That was like my. Like, I wasn't huge into the movies, but the games were always so much fun to play, and I remember them doing it in the games too. You're in the Matrix, and it's just like, why is it? Everything's green. Like, I don't like this.
Yeah, and like just like you were saying, I was a big fan that I got into Enter the Matrix. I think I was playing that before I even seen the movies at that time, so I really didn't know what was going on within the story. But then they had like the other game that came out was like Path of Neo, where it's all 3 movies combined into one game, and you're just pretty much playing through all the movies with some extra stuff added in. But that's really what got kind of kickstarted me into my love of the Matrix. And I just love this movie really sets up the lore of the movie and these characters and the world itself really well in just a little over 2 hours, and they do it extremely well. But yeah, just to kind of get into the movie here, you start out with the famous code strains from the Matrix, just a little like raining code coming down. That's how they read the Matrix and see what's in there. And you got Trinity talking with Cypher, Joey Pants, kind of a voiceover talking about how they're looking for someone, and they think there's someone on the line. There's lines being traced or whatnot. And the cops bust in. They find Trinity sitting there. The agents show up outside. And I love the line where he's like talking to the cops, like, you guys are supposed to hold on for us. You didn't you just let him go up in there to find her. And like, well, we could handle it. It's just a little girl or whatever. He's like,
They're bringing her down now.
No, Lieutenant, your men are already dead.
But yeah, the agents go in there, and you kind of really see how big of a deal they are, because as soon as they show up, Trinity just books it out of there. Man,
just a great shot of the whole the kick where she hovers in the air. And then
that's the first bit of the like the bullet time stuff that you get in the movie is that where she's just hovering in the air and the camera spins around her and she kicks him.
Yep.
But that's a nice little action scene to kick off the movie, and then you get the cool shot of just her running across the rooftops being chased by the agents. I always think of like The Crow during this, because I just think of that Crow, the scene in The Crow where he's just running across the rooftops is very similar of like how it's shot in a way. Yeah. Where it looks like you're seeing it from like another rooftop across the way a little bit. It's kind of just very far out, and I love that the way that it's shot. And then Trinity, like Raiden dives through the window, like Raiden from Mortal Kombat.
Looked rough. That looked really rough.
Very rough. And then she like immediately dives through the window and rolls down these stairs, and she's just like looking up, waiting for them to come through the window. But every time I just think like the way that she's just arced, it looks like just like that Raiden dive.
It was like, oof. I do like the whole thing how she's like telling herself to get up. She's like waiting, for them to come through that window, and she's just like, no, you got to get going. You got to get going.
Yeah. Because we'll kind of talk about it when we get there, but the agents are something you just don't want to mess with in this universe. No. And they kind of dumb it down a little bit in the other ones, which it sucks because they make them up to be the big bad, where like Morpheus, like nobody's ever survived a fight with the agents or whatever. Yeah. And then through the next couple movies, everybody's fighting agents. Like it's no problem.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's another cool scene. She gets to the phone, which is their exit way to get out of the Matrix, is they have to dial them up and they have to answer a phone call to get them out. And just whenever she gets to the phone, like the truck's coming at her and just busts through that wall as soon as she gets out. After she leaves, the agents show up there, and they pretty much they say there's a mole. Somebody's given them information from the outside, and they know who they're looking for at this point, which is Neo, who we go into his story now, and he is pretty much just this hacker who's living a kind of a double life, they say. He's just has a day job, I forget what Agent Smith says in the interrogation. He's like, oh, you pay your taxes, you go to work, and then at night you're a hacker that pretty much breaks every internet law known to man, and he's a wanted man, and he's just making money on the side by doing that. But he wakes up and his computer has a message on it saying wake up, and that's kind of a motto through this movie is wake up, like you're dreaming, you're in a simulation. But that comes up like 2 other times in this movie is wake up. And before he wakes up on his computer, I don't know if you noticed, he has like newspaper clippings of Morpheus and stuff.
Yeah.
So Morpheus is well known, like the agents are looking for him. And obviously Neo is looking for him as well. He's getting messaged to on his computer. Somebody's hacking into his stuff, telling him to follow the white rabbit, go down the rabbit hole. Immediately gets like a knock at the door, and it's just somebody that's buying like software or viruses. You never really know what it is, what he's buying off of them. But it's definitely serious, because like Neo says, like, hey, if you get caught with this, you didn't get it from me. You don't know who I am. And he pays him like $2,000 for like this little like floppy disk. So it must be something serious.
I was like, damn, it's got to be something really crazy.
Yeah, but they said like, oh, you look like you need to unplug or whatever. You need a little R&R, which is a funny choice of words, is unplug it, in this movie. But there's like, oh, you should come out to the club or whatever with us. And then like the chick like leans in and she has the white rabbit on her shoulder. So Neo obviously has to follow the white rabbit. So he goes to like this BDSM 90s grunge metal club or whatever.
Playing Dragula by Rob Zombie.
Yeah. And everybody's just like in these BDSM outfits and weird masks and stuff. Not the club that I would probably go to in the 90s, but hey, if that's what you're into, I'm not gonna kink shame. It is what it is. Yeah. But yeah, he ends up running into Trinity there, who is just saying like, we know who you're looking for. We're also looking for you. You don't know how deep this goes. And she's like, we know what question you want to ask or whatever. And he's like, what is the Matrix? And you're gonna get used to Keanu Reeves Neo asking questions, because that's pretty much what he does for 80% of this movie. Is
Yep.
all of his lines are just asking people questions up
Yep.
until like the last third of the movie. He immediately wakes up. He's late for work. He goes in. He has his normal day job. His boss is ripping him for being late, and his boss is eerily similar to Agent Smith. It's not the same actor, but they found someone that's like a lot like him.
You believe that you are special, that somehow the rules do not apply to you. Obviously, you are mistaken.
Like,
I had to do a double take on it. I was like, is that? Oh, okay. No, but I get it. But yeah, I think this whole first act of this movie is what probably got me confused as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like, it's always that question of like, what's real life and what's the Matrix, or what's, and I don't think I ever grasped it back then, but then watching it now, I'm like, I was still kind of confused at the beginning. Like, so what is going on here? Like, what is real life? What is the simulation or whatever, or the Matrix? And then once they kind of, but then they kind of just like, they lay everything out pretty well for you. And you're like, oh, okay, now I get it.
Yeah. And it's like what I was saying before, is they don't just throw it all on you at once either. They give you a little bit of information, have something else happen, and then they give you a little bit more information. So it's not a lot to take in at one time. So you're just, all right, I don't know how to process this information going forward.
Yeah.
But he goes back to work, immediately gets a package with a phone in it. Of course, it's Morpheus. And the agents are hunting Neo because they know who he is and that Morpheus is looking for him.
Yep.
And they figured out if they catch Neo, that would lead him to Morpheus. Morpheus is kind of guiding him in real time through this office, like how to get out. He's like ducking through cubicles and stuff. And then he finally has to like climb out this window and walk across the ledge of a building to get up to like a window washer like mechanism.
Scaffolding.
Yeah, that'll take you up to the roof to get away. And he just couldn't do it. He gave up. He's like, I can't do this. Fuck this shit.
Yeah.
Which I don't blame him, man. I mean, he had to go around like that huge pole that was sticking out. He dropped the phone and everything.
Yep.
But it immediately just cuts to him being dragged out by the agents, and Trinity's just, oh shit, here we go again. And then you just cut to them interrogating him. They're just saying like what we were saying before. They're just like, oh, you live a double life. You've broken pretty much every internet law known to man. We can take you down for this. But if you help lead us to Morpheus, you know what we want. We can maybe forget about all this stuff. And immediately Keanu Reeves is just like, you know what? Give me my phone call. And he's like, fuck you. Give me my phone call. He's like, I know my rights.
He's like, how about this? I'm just going to flip you the bird and you give me my phone call. And that was a really good line delivery.
Yeah. And then like, I love that the next line Agent Smith says is like, well, what's good as a phone call if you can't speak, or whatever he said.
Oh yeah. and then it happens and you're just like,
yeah, what is going on? Because it's crazy enough that his mouth closed is shut where he can't talk, but then they throw him on a table and they pull out like this big weird like bug creature that crawls in through his belly button. We're just like, all right, we're just going completely balls out right now. Like, what is going on at this point? Like, how are they doing all this? But like as it's crawling into like his belly button, then he wakes up out. He just thinks it's another dream that he's having.
Yeah.
And then immediately, like when he wakes up, Morpheus calls him, saying like, "All right, if you really want to go down this rabbit hole, you got to get out now. They're on to you. Meet me here, so and so place." He goes out and he gets picked up by Trinity. And I believe APOC and Switch, not Twitch. Yeah. And they're just saying like, you know, the road that you're on and what it leads to. We have another place that you can go. And they don't really leave it up to your imagination, because she just opens the door and it's just a dark road. That's like, they're like, well, you know the road it can lead you down to. But then they know that he's bugged, and they pull out this huge contraption that just like sucks it out of his belly button.
I'm sitting there going, what in the hell is happening right now? Like, I don't remember this. I really don't. It's been a long time, but I don't remember any of this.
You're like, oh, he's bugged. Like they've seen it before. And it's just like this big tube that goes over his belly button, and it just like clamps down with like these just pinchers into his stomach.
Yeah.
And then she's like has this little screen, and it's like this little like hologram on it. She's like, oh, I'm losing it. She's looking for it, like a little X-ray machine looking into his stomach. And then it just like sucks the bug out of his belly button,
Yeah.
I guess. And then just throw it out the window, and it breaks.
It's practical too, which I really liked when the worm comes out or whatever the hell it is
into the jar.
little tube. It's practical. It's like squirming in there. And you're like, ooh, it's gross.
Yeah, and they never say, because like you would think after something being sucked out of your belly button, you'd be just bleeding all over, but nope. You just pull your shirt down, you're good.
It's fine. It's fine.
It's fine. You don't have a huge hole in your belly now.
Your belly button just closes like a door. That's fine.
Yeah. But they take him to Morpheus, and I love these shots before you get into like, of course, a huge famous moment from the movie. But I just love those shots of just, it's the camera just looking straight down, and you see it like on the side of the building as it's pouring rain. And then when they go inside, you see the camera just looking straight down through like that spiral staircase with like the checkered flooring and everything. I just love how like the visuals of this like, building they're going into. Neo finally meets Morpheus, telling him like what the Matrix is. Like, you've been a slave your whole life and you don't even know it. The machines are using everybody, and they're keeping you in the Matrix to pretty much to think that you're just going about your daily life, but they're really using humans for energy and resources at the same time. And pretty much their whole goal is to find the one. And the one, I guess there's been multiple ones from what he's saying, because the original one is the first person that was like born in the Matrix, and they were able to, the first person that was actually able to like alter stuff within the Matrix since he was born in it. And that's who helped the first group of people get out and break out of the Matrix, which included Morpheus and some of the other people that formed Scion, which you don't see in this movie. But the Oracle, who you get to later in the movie, has prophesied that there's going to be a second coming of the One at some point, and he believes that Neo is the One, and he's going to be the one that helps shut down the Sentinels and shut down the Matrix and save the world at this point, pretty much. He's Jesus.
Yeah, literally.
But of course, you get the famous, like, you got to take the blue pill or take the red pill. The blue pill is like you go back to your normal life, your cushy life. You just go back to your dead-end job or whatever. You take the red pill, you go down the rabbit hole, and then you see what real life is all about. And of course, he takes the red pill, and I love the scene because he's like, he starts freaking out a little bit, and then he's like touching the mirror, and the mirror's like absorbing him. And it's like, it's not a great effect, like you were saying at the time. It didn't age well at all.
It was a T1000 effect.
It was
T2. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say the T1000 maybe looked a little better, even though it was a little while earlier than this. But as like it's eating them up there, I guess the red pill, from what they're saying, it's a trace program, from what they're saying.
Yeah.
And the red pill just pretty much makes them able to find his physical body in their real world, so they can go and get him and put him on their ship. And I love the effect as it's slowly consuming him, and it goes into his mouth, like that weird like digital noise that it makes as it's going down his throat.
I'm glad you mentioned that. That was really cool.
Yeah, I love it. It's like very like kind of like the internet dial-up sounds a little bit mixed with other digital stuff at the same time. But I love that sound. It's just so satisfying for some reason. Yeah. But yeah, he wakes up for real, and you actually get to see where the real humans are being kept, and they're being kept in like these liquid goo pods just on this wall of just other people, and they're being just fed nutrients and stuff through like these wires that are just plugged into their body and stuff. Very weird, man. Very weird. Yeah, you haven't really seen anything like it up until this point.
It's very confusing when you see, like, when I first see it, I'm like, what is going on here?
Yeah,
like
because they don't mention. I had no idea what was going on.
Yeah, because you don't get the explanation of what they're doing until later. So like you're just looking at this as like, is this like a way for them to, like, it was kind of confusing until you get the explanation from Morpheus later on why it's all like that.
Yeah, and like the goo drains, he comes up, he's like, it looks like he's just covered in like KY jelly or something.
Which he probably was.
It probably was, yeah. But that huge like sentinel machine comes up and like unhooks him and everything, and like pulls like that big rod out of the back of his head. But yeah, it sucks him down to that chute and spits him out into like this gross, nasty water where he gets picked up by Morpheus and the crew of the Nebuchadnezzar. It's hard. I always struggle pronouncing.
Such a great name.
As he goes on board, they're just kind of doing tests on him and stuff. They're pulling up some of the other like holes that he has in his arms and stuff. They keep the one in his neck because that's how they put him and like jack them into the Matrix. Yep. And when he wakes up, he has like ones in his arms as well. I'm not sure if that's used for the Matrix. They don't really go into that. But it looks painful, man. Like when he wakes up, he pulls like, it looks like a aux jack when you're like playing guitar, like that you plug into an amp. It's like in his forearm that he pulls out, and it's like super long too.
The one that they put in his head when they do put them into the Matrix, it's like this long, like
longer than your head.
Yeah, I'm like, well, how does that work?
and like whenever they do it for the first time, I'm like, this may feel a little weird. You're like, yeah, you would think it would hurt extremely, be extremely painful.
They're just like, oh, it's uncomfortable, and you're like,
yeah, that may feel a little weird.
You're just getting stabbed in the back of the head. It's fine.
But Morpheus explains to him that you were in 1999, but now it is closer to like 2199 at this point. Introduces the crew of the Nebuchadnezzar itself. You got APOC, you got Switch, Cypher played by Joey Pants, and you got Tank and Dozer. Tank is like the guy that runs, pretty much handles all the computer systems, jacks them in and out. He's their operator is what they call him.
I love this character.
Yeah, he's got a lot of charisma. You see him in the other movies. You got Dozer, I think that's his brother or cousin. I forget which one it is, but he is related to him. And then you got Mouse, who's the youngest guy out of them all. But I guess he helps program like some of the training stuff, which they talk about a little later. Morpheus takes him into the Construct, which is the loading program for the Matrix. It's just this white room. And that's pretty much where you get your first bit of exposition. And that's what I was mentioning, where Morpheus is talking about who the one is and what the world is at this point. And he's explaining that pretty much AI is what took over the world at that point. AI is what is the downfall of human civilization. And they were saying that AI was solar powered from what they were saying, and the humans is we blocked out the sun. We like shot missiles or whatever at the sun, and that's why when you see like all the like back stuff, it's all cloudy and it's super dark and gross. But he takes them into the desert of the real.
Welcome to the desert of the real.
Which is just this wasteland, just nothing but dark clouds and machines flying around and broken down wasteland cities. But the AI was the downfall of the human race at that point, which has been used in countless movies since then. I mean,
it sure has.
Terminator was way before this, but it's a similar story in a way.
When the Wachowskis were writing this, they were like, they're like, it's not the same as Terminator. we the humans shot the nukes into the sky. Okay, it's different. It's not the same. Like,
we actually did this to stop the AIs. We turned it around on them. I was
literally watching this movie going, I've heard this plot before.
Yeah, it's just switched around. Instead of AIs using the nukes on us, we used it to try to stop them a little
exactly.
bit. The AI, since they were solar powered and energy powered, they started using people as its energy resource, and that's why they started building these pods and using all these people to actually power themselves to make them go, and they can actually just keep producing and making new machines. And at a certain point, when they ran out of people, they started developing and making their own people, which you see like a little video of like this little baby just like in a pod, just covered with, it's so uncomfortable to see. It's like all these wires going in and out of its mouth and stuff.
Yeah.
And they talk about like when the people die, they break them down into a liquid to feed the other like people that are trapped and stuff. It's odd. It's very odd. They really went out to develop the backstory of how everything happened.
Oh yeah.
But it's very in depth. Like I love how they went about to develop it, and that's not even just talking about the Matrix at this point. It's just talking about how civilization ended up ending. Then Morpheus pretty much tells him that Neo is the prophecy of the One, and he explains the story, which I already mentioned. After he comes out, Tank talks to him, just introducing himself, says that he tells Neo about the last city and civilization called Zion, which was pretty much they've kept secret from the agents and the Sentinels and all the machines, because it's like deep underground, apparently next to the core to keep it warm and everything. They talk about Zion. You don't see it in this movie. You see it in the next 2 movies. But that really comes to play. But that's what the agents and the Sentinels want, is the Zion code, so they can get in, so they can take over everybody else. And that's why they want Morpheus, is because the leaders of all these different crews and ships, those are the only ones that have the codes to get into Zion and know where it's at.
Right.
So as an outsider, to anybody that hasn't watched this movie, it's a lot to take in. So it's
Yes.
very easy to watch for the first time and be like, what the hell is going on? This is so confusing. After a little bit of exposition that you get from Morpheus and Tank, it's finally time to get Neo caught up with some training. So Tank puts him in, and he's just putting these floppy disks in and loading training modules into Neo's brain, so he like instantly knows like Taekwondo. He instantly knows, like he says, he's like, I know Kung Fu.
That was great.
But he like instantly learns it. Like he's not even going into the Matrix or doing anything. He's just plugged in, and he's just loading it into his brain. So he just instantly knows how to do these things. And then once he does that, Morpheus comes in and is like, all right, it's time to actually put you in, and we're gonna spar a little bit here. And Morpheus is just trying to push him to his limits. What he says is he's trying to get Neo to free his mind, because when you free your mind, you're capable of doing whatever you would like in the Matrix. You can, it's, since Neo is the One, in theory, he can alter and change the Matrix. Like Morpheus is saying, there's leeway in it where you can bend and sometimes break the rules of reality within the Matrix, since it is a computer program. That's why they can jump extremely far. They can do weird bullet time moves and stuff like that. But Neo, he can do stuff that Morpheus and Trinity and some of these other people that can go in the Matrix, they can't do, which you'll see at the end of the movie what he can do that they can't. But it's just a pretty cool sequence of them just doing kung fu and fighting each other and just throwing each other around this dojo that they created in the Matrix training program.
Yeah.
But I just like the little little quips that Morpheus is giving them as they're fighting. He's like, "Stop trying to hit me and hit me already."
Yeah.
And then he after he hits him one time, he's like, "Do you think none of this is real? You can do what you want." He's like, "Do you think this is air you're breathing now?"
Do you believe that my being stronger or faster has anything to do with my muscles in this place?
Then they load him up into the jump program, which apparently nobody has been able to do. Nobody successfully does the jump on their first try, which you think that's setting up that Neo is going to be that first one to do it. But of course,
he doesn't.
Yeah.
I like where he sinks into the road.
Oh yeah, and it just plops him back up.
Yeah.
Oh, that'd be terrifying, man. They just fall.
Yep.
Especially after seeing Morpheus, the dude training you, jumps how far in the distance just to a whole nother skyscraper. You're like, oh, all right, yeah, okay. How am I supposed to do that?
Right.
Yeah, it makes me think of the Sam Raimi Spider-Man when he's trying to jump across the building. There is another training program that he takes him in, which is a simulation of the simulation. It's like a Matrix training within a training program. But as Morpheus is talking to him, explaining him about the world, Neo just gets distracted by the woman in the red dress, which is it's there on purpose to distract him.
Right.
Because as soon as he turns around, the agent's sitting there with a gun pointed to his head. But that's what he's saying, and that's pretty much him explaining to Neo the reason that the agents are there. The agents are built they're like the virus, is to, take out intruders that are there. But they're also part of the Sentinels and the machines themselves, trying to find Zion and the other people that are trying to bust out as well. But they can track people by cell phones that they have. And they also track them by like glitches in the Matrix, which comes up in a little bit later as well, like deja vu. As Neo's getting trained, you're kind of getting trained as well for the rules of the movie.
Right.
It cuts back in and out of going through these training montages, and then back on the Nebuchadnezzar with Neo, and he walks in on Cypher, just kind of suspiciously sitting in Tank's chair by himself at the monitors watching the code screen. Whereas like if you're Neo, you would imagine like, all right, this is a little weird, something's up here, this is a little odd. But just like Cypher's trying to like kind of get Neo's head, I guess, a little bit, where he's just like, oh, so Morpheus kind of told you you're the one. That's a lot to take in. And you're like, how do you respond to that, where you're supposed to be where you're told that you're the guy that's supposed to save the world? But then he goes on saying like, you probably are thinking the same thing I'm thinking, right? It's like, damn, I wish I would have took that blue pill, where he's just kind of putting that out there. Is like, yeah, I kind of wish I would have stayed in the simulation. Like everything outside of here is just not what it's cracked up to be.
Yeah.
And they don't waste any time getting into him being the bad dude either, because as soon as that scene ends where Neo leaves, it cuts to him sitting at dinner with Agent Smith.
Yeah. I love the whole thing with him holding up the steak. And he's like, I know this isn't real, but I know like when I put this in my mouth, my brain's going to tell me that it's, juicy and, what, I don't remember how else he describes it.
Yeah.
And he eats it, and what does he say? It's like unbridled bliss or something like that.
After 9 years, you know what I realize? Ignorance is bliss.
Where he's like, it doesn't matter. This is still great.
Yeah, it sucks being out in the real world, but it kind of, that life in the Matrix seems a little better because you could actually have a somewhat resemblance of a real life, of a normal life in there, even though it's technically not real.
Right.
But Agent Smith is just making a deal with him, trying to get some information out of him. Cypher says he doesn't know the codes to the Scion mainframe, but he can get you the person that does, which is Morpheus. So pretty much he's going to be selling out Morpheus and the team to the agents. And what he wants in return is to be put back in the Matrix, not remember. He wants his memory wiped so he doesn't remember ever leaving. And he just wants to be set up for life, pretty much. Like he wants the easy way in the Matrix.
Yep.
I kind of get like a little bonding experience with Neo and everybody else around the table. He's talking with Mouse, where Mouse is trying to pimp out the girl in the red dress that he developed.
Yeah.
Because he's the one that developed her and everything.
Yeah, he's just getting real up close. He's just like, hey, I can get you that girl in the red dress. Just let me know. And it's like, oh, pimping her out, are we?
He's just saying that like everybody has their wants and needs. So hey,
yes.
Yeah, you gotta, you gotta meet your needs sometimes. But then Morpheus comes in and is like, it's time. And he's like, it's time to take you to see the Oracle. They've mentioned the Oracle a couple times before. Everybody has seen the Oracle at this point, Trinity, Morpheus, and they all get a prophecy. Pretty much they have their fortunes read, and she tells them their future, which you find out Morpheus's and Trinity talks about hers later in the movie as well. But it's a big deal. Everybody goes in, they get jacked into the Matrix, they have their cool outfits and everything going in, and you immediately know something's off because as they're walking out, Cypher rings up his phone and then just throws it away. Pretty much just luring the agents, letting them know that they're there and that how they can track them. They go to the oracles. You get to meet Spoon Kid, who kind of teaches Neo a little bit about freeing his mind, where it's like, don't imagine that the spoon's there, just imagine that the spoon's not real at all.
Only try to realize the truth.
What truth?
There is no spoon.
Neo's like bending the spoon, and then it just kind of snaps out of it when the oracle comes in to get him.
Yep.
But that's kind of, other than Morpheus teaching him, that kid kind of opens his mind about how to free his mind a little bit and how to utilize a little bit of these powers here and there. He talks with the Oracle, who's a pretty cool character in the series here. She's super nice. She's making cookies for everybody.
Smell good, don't they? Yeah.
Can't go wrong with that.
Can't go wrong with that. But as she's talking with him, like she's just saying like she's been around since, she's one of the first people that's been around since the beginning. But she's like, don't worry about the vase or whatever. He bumps in the vase and knocks it over, and she's just like predicting all this stuff before it even happens. And then she's like,
Right.
the question is, would you have still knocked it over if you would have known about it? If I would have told you beforehand, like, would you change fate? And that's another underlying thing throughout the movie, because whenever Morpheus talks with Neo, he asks him if he believes in fate, and Neo says, like, I don't like the idea of fate because I don't like the idea of me not being in control of my future.
Right.
And I technically, I don't know if I really understand it, because I feel like the Oracle tricks him at this point, because she's saying that, like, you're not the one, and everything. And I think she's purposely trying to trick him into, like, falling for the fate thing, where she wants him to make his own direction instead of falling into fate. Which they don't really come out and say that. It kind of wants you to kind of figure that out for yourself.
Yeah, she's just like, oh yeah, I guess you're not it. You're not the one. And he's just like, I figured it's gonna suck for Morpheus when he finds out. And then of course Morpheus is like, I don't want to know.
Yeah,
what she tells you is for you and for nobody else.
Yeah, because
like,
before he even leaves, she tells him, like, Morpheus is going to sacrifice himself for you, and then you have to make a decision on that. Like, you both, it's either he's going to die or you're going to die. But she doesn't tell him how it's going to happen or why it's going to happen. But he has to make a choice. But little does he know, in that choice lies who he actually is. He is the one.
Yep.
But yeah, just like you were saying, as he was leaving, Morpheus like, don't even tell me. What she tells you is for you alone. But I like how, like, as she's like walking him out, she gives him a cookie, and she's like, by the time you finish that cookie, you're gonna feel all better. Don't worry about it. You'll be a lot happier when you shut the door and you leave. They're going back to, like, that big, like, hotel building that they're going to, and as they're going through, something's wrong, because as they're walking up the stairs, Neo looks around, he sees a cat walk by, and then the same cat walks by again. He's like, oh, that's weird. Little deja vu, and immediately everyone's like, what? Wait, what?
Deja vu.
What the hell did you see? And he's like, oh, I saw a cat. And he's like, all right, we gotta go. There's a glitch in the Matrix. They're tracking us or whatever. And then like, it cuts up to Mouse, and he like opens up the windows, and they're all bricks now. So they're kind of molding. They're changing the world around them to trap them in the building. And then you get the first death of the movie, really, here. Mouse gets killed. He goes out in a blaze of glory.
Oh, yeah, he does. He's got those two guns. He's just like, and he kind of just falls backwards.
But yeah, he bites the dust pretty early. They're kind of just running throughout this building trying to get out, as the agents and like the SWAT team that's with the agents are just surrounding the building, gumming up the stairs. Tank's calling into him, and he's trying to get them some information before they can track the phone and see where they're at. Which leads them into like a hole in the wall, and they're just crawling down through like this super skinny part of this inside of the wall, going down through the wall, trying to get down to the basement. And of course Cypher, which I don't think it was on purpose that he sneezed, because there was actual dust going around, but you can easily believe that maybe he did it on purpose.
Yeah, I feel he might have did it on purpose, because when everything happens, it's easy for him to separate from them.
Yeah.
Which then leads to later events.
Yeah. But I love, like, as they're like crawling down through, like they're busting through and they're shooting through the walls and stuff. And like the agent comes through and he grabs Neo, and just something about it is so hilarious to me, because this is where Morpheus sacrifices himself, and he like charges up like a Super Saiyan before he goes through the wall. It's like, and he jumps through the wall. And then he just slide down through that wall, and like Neo doesn't want to leave him behind, but Trinity's like, you gotta go now, and she just pulls him down, and you're just sliding down through the wall. But as Morpheus said, like, nobody survives a fight with an agent, but he's out here holding his own against the Agent Smith in this tiny little bathroom, just fighting each other.
Yeah. But he also gets the shit kicked out of him.
He does. And I always thought it was a cool scene, but as I was watching it last night, I never noticed how kind of funny the fight choreography is, because there's one point in it where he's like trapped up against the corner of this wall, and as Smith is punching at him, he's like doing this, and it just looks like he has like little baby T-Rex arms. And
there's
fighting.
Always noises.
Yeah, there's always noises.
And I'm like, holy, what is happening?
But yeah, he gives him a run for his money, but of course Agent Smith takes him takes him down. And then he even has other SWAT members come in and beat his ass as well. And I like once again, you get another overhead shot of just the SWAT team coming in, and he tries to fight him, but then they end up taking him down. And like you were saying, that gives them time, Cypher time to get away from them. He gives Tank a call first, which Tank immediately knows is kind of weird. He's like, where's Trinity and Neo and them? He's like, oh, we got separated. Don't worry about it. Just jack me in. And he's like, pull me out.
Where do I go?
But of course, Cypher gets out first and causes all sorts of problems. He goes out and he blasts Tank and I forget the other dude's name already, Dozer, with like this electric gun, I guess. Like, I don't even know what you would call it. But it just blasts him with electricity and shoots him off the chair. You think he's dead. He actually ends up killing Dozer, though, unfortunately, which, I mean, you don't even really get to see much of Dozer. Trinity, Neo, and APOC and Switch are trying to get back to their phone so they can get out. And right when they get the phone, that's when Ajax gets killed. So you get a bit of dialogue. Evil guy just giving out his plans. Part of the movie here.
Like, you're so pretty, Trinity. And I was like, oh, no.
Yeah, where you kind of get that a couple scenes earlier in the movie where you think he has like a thing for her.
Yeah, she's like, you've never brought me food.
Yeah, where you kind of get a thing that he has like a little thing for her, but that's about it. Like maybe one scene before.
Yeah.
But you really get it here where he's like odd, like weirdly creepy up close to her face as she's like asleep into the actual computer.
But he's also talking to her on the phone.
Yeah, talking to her while he's face to face with her body. Yeah. But he's just like, oh, it would be a shame what would happen to like some of your other friends or whatever. He starts like pulling their plugs while they're in the Matrix, which, as Morpheus talks about earlier in the movie, everything that happens in the Matrix, if you die in the Matrix, you die in real life, because without a brain, you can't survive, and it pretty much kills your brain. And he unplugs them while they're in the Matrix, and they just go full ragdoll. and she immediately, he's like, oh, it'd be a shame what happened to APOC, and she like looks over and she's like, Trinity, no. He's just limp. And then like Switch goes over and is looking at him. She's like, I don't want to go out like this, and then immediately just goes limp again. But he's just taking out everybody, and as he's like gonna pull the plug on Neo, he's like, oh, you would, if he truly is the one, then something would happen. You would need a miracle to stop me from killing him and doing what I'm doing now. And of course Ajax is still alive and gives him a taste of his own medicine, just blasts him.
Yep.
And of course he then brings Neo and Trinity out. They're at wit's end right now, trying to figure out what to do at this point, because Morpheus is kidnapped. At this point, he's up on top of like a militarized skyscraper in this building, just chained up. They're injecting him with just like this liquid stuff that apparently is like a true serum. It like hacks into his brain so that he can just give him the codes. And so what Tank suggests to do is just pull the plug, because he's like, this is bigger than you, me, Neo, all of us. Like, we can't let them get the codes to get to Zion. That's, above all else, we got to protect Zion. So he just suggests pulling the plug on Morpheus. Even though Morpheus is important, the greater good is more important than Morpheus at this point.
Right.
Which, I mean, it makes sense in their current given situation. But of course, Neo's the one, man. You got to go in and save Morpheus.
Yeah. He's like, let's go. And of course, I like the whole thing with, Trinity says she's going, and he's like, no, you're not. And she's like, hell, I'm not. I'm the, ranking officer here. Like you're nothing right now. You're nothing. So you're not telling me. She
says the line like, I believe I care about Morpheus more than you do. I'm going in.
Yeah.
But before you get to the actual like suit up and boot up type scene, Agent Smith and Morpheus, because the other agents end up leaving the room, and you kind of get of a deeper side of Agent Smith, if you will, to Morpheus, where he's talking about like the humans are viruses that have plagued the earth, and the machines are the ones that have come in to kind of rid the world of the virus, and that his main goal is to just break out and get out himself. Like, he's tired of the world, he's tired of the Matrix, and he's like, I'm tired of the smell. He's like, he's like, I smell your stench. He's like grabbing the sweat off his head and like shoving it up into his nose.
Yeah.
So,
like, what the hell?
Very weird. And it's funny because like one of the other agents comes in. He's like, what are you doing?
He's like,
nothing.
Nothing.
Nothing. Don't worry about what I was doing. Neo and Trinity go into like the training module, and you get like the famous line. He's like,
Guns. Lots of guns.
Rows and rows of guns just coming down, and they get like armored up. They get strapped up with guns. And then you easily get like maybe probably the best scene of the movie, probably. And that's just the all-out, just shoot-out brawl in the lobby of this building where they just walk in slow motion and put the duffel bags on the conveyor belt. And I love like the guard stops him and he opens up his coat. He's like, holy shit. And it's just lined with guns and bullets and stuff. But yeah, great fucking scene. They're just blowing the hell out of everybody just pulling gun. It reminds me of like a Boondock Saints, like with the way how the dude just has the guns on his vest.
Yep.
Very similar to that. And I think it was like the same year almost as Boondock Saints came out. It's very close.
I think 99.
Yeah, so very close in timeline there, but very similar situations. But you're getting a lot of like the bullet time stuff, running up the walls. You get a cool scene. He's like doing a cartwheel with an AR while he's shooting.
Yeah.
You see all these moves like in the video games as well.
Oh yeah.
The one move was really cool is like Trinity like kicks a shotgun out of a guy's hand into her hands and shoots him with it.
Yes. So good.
Yeah, lots of slow motion. I love like the far away shots as it's looking at like Neo running through the pillars as he's shooting and stuff, and like just dust and debris flying everywhere. These pieces of these pillars and stone are just falling apart and getting blown away. It was just made very well, and I just love this scene. It's one of the standout scenes in the movie.
Oh yeah. Very iconic.
But that's like the first time you really see Neo in action. They hop in the elevator, and I'm not entirely sure why they did this, but they like put the bomb in the elevator and they climb up top and they shoot it and they just get like zipped up to the top. But I don't really understand the like need for the bomb to blow up the bottom of the building other than like turning off the power and
turn off the power.
Alarms.
It sets off the sprinklers because it's all coming
like,
down, but also maybe to prevent more people from getting upstairs.
Possibly, yeah. They never really dive into why they do it. They just do it. But that's
cool. It was a cool shot though of them kind of riding the line up as the elevator falls and just blows out from the door.
Yeah, and that's probably one of the worst shots. One of the cool shots and worst shots, like not them zipping up into the elevator, but like as the fire's going through the lobby and shooting like the elevator door through. Fire is notoriously terrible to like animate and do CG, especially in the 90s and 2000s. So that's easily one of the worst looking effects in the movie. You go directly from them zipping up in this elevator to them already fighting people on the rooftop.
Yep.
There's no in between scene at all, really. They're just automatically fighting people on the rooftop. And then you get one of the other famous scenes that has been parodied so many times in countless movies and TV shows, which is the infamous bullet dodge scene where he just leans back and dodges the bullets. And it always kind of ends very anticlimactic because he gets shot.
Yeah, and then he just falls like he's doing the whole thing where he's kind of, it's something that's hard to do in reality. Yeah, but he gets shot and he just falls on his back.
Yeah, where every time I think of it, like you think of it, it's such a badass scene, but it always ends on such a down, like it's just anticlimactic weird note where he just falls. Just Trinity, help.
Well, it's funny because like Trinity comes up to him and she's like, we can't do that. I've never seen a person, someone like us move like them. And he's like, well, why does it matter when I got shot?
Yeah. Yeah, he's like, well, I still got shot.
Yeah.
But yeah, as like the agent comes up to execute him, she's like, dodge this. And I love like the blood cloud that comes out
the
as
mist.
she shoots him. Yeah, it's great every time. But that's like the first death that you see of an agent in the movie, and Trinity's the one that kills him.
Yep.
But they see a helicopter, and he's like, "Well, do you know how to fly?" She's like, "Well, not yet." And she like immediately calls Tank, and she's like, "Oh, now I know how to fly."
It's like, let me close my eyes for a second. Okay, we're good.
Yeah, I'm good. I can fly. And they just immediately fly over and just start shooting this Gatling gun.
Oh yeah,
and I have no clue how he doesn't shoot Morpheus in this scene, because the way that it's shot, it just looks like he's just going like back and forth,
panning across.
Yeah. So he's shooting everywhere. So I have no idea how Morpheus doesn't get shot in this scene.
He's got that plot armor.
Yeah, and like it's not like the agents are like dodging him like how they were dodging before, or like moving super fast. They're just sitting there shooting back at him. They're not like moving or really anything. Like the one dude like just dives out of the room and leaves, and the other Agent Smith gets shot and killed. And he just kind of morphs back into like the SWAT team member. And then Morpheus finally gets like the strength and the courage to break out of his chains. And as he's running, you get a kind of a cool shot, like a slow-mo like zoom in of a bullet getting shot through the wall and through his ankle, and like the blood mixing with the water as he's running through the water. And obviously he's not going to make it, so Neo has a bungee cord strapped to him all ready to go, jumps out and meets him. And you've seen a lot of these shots in like action movies. It seems like in the 90s, some Arnold Schwarzenegger movies or whatever, with just people hanging from helicopters.
Oh yeah.
You get that scene, just Neo and Morpheus just getting flown around in this helicopter dangling from this building, just flying around. Apparently they got in trouble for this, filming this part of the movie, because they didn't have any like permits as they were filming in Sydney, Australia, flying this helicopter around skyscrapers. So apparently they had to do it super fast to just get the coverage they needed.
That guerrilla filming.
Yeah, exactly. So apparently they almost got into some trouble while they were filming that one. But they have to find a way to land this helicopter, because as they're flying away, the agents shoot the gas or whatever out of the helicopter. It's just leaking. So they're going down. They get above a building, and he just drops Morpheus onto the building.
Yep.
And I like how he lands, and then he's like sliding across the top of this building while holding the bungee cord. And I'm glad that Trinity was able to just get to that bungee cord, or else he would have had to pull that whole helicopter in by himself.
Yeah. You just see him go over the end, and you're like,
you think that he's going to do it too. You're like, is he going to pull this whole helicopter up or save them?
This is how you find out he's the one.
Yeah. He just reels in this helicopter by himself. But I really love this shot as well, as she jumps out and she's swinging. And you see the helicopter hit the building, and it just ripples, and you see like the glass rippling, and as it's bursting.
Yeah.
And she's like, it looks like the camera is behind the window of another building that she flies into, and that glass cracks. And I just love the way that was shot too.
Yes. It's that iconic scene of when the building in front of her explodes, but it explodes in like a circle.
Around, and she's in the middle of it.
Yeah, and then she it pushes her into the other side, and she just smashes into the glass, and then just keeps bouncing off of it.
Yep, and then he pulls her up, and they end up getting away. They go to the subway. Tank calls them. Morpheus gets out. As Trinity's going to get out, because the agents were able to track them because they're dealing with the phones. He morphs into one of the bums that's sitting there in the subway.
Yeah.
And as she's getting unplugged, he shoots at her, and it blows up the phone, coincidentally. And they're immediately telling Neo to run. You're not going to be able to fight an agent, but of course you can't. You know, he's the one, man. He's got to go out and duke it out with one of the agents.
Oh yeah.
And then you probably get one of the best fight scenes in the movie. Is just Neo and Agent Smith just duking it out in the subway. A lot of cool shots. They dive at each other while they're shooting, and they're laying on the ground, and like, you're out of bullets, and he's like, you are too. And they just go fisticuffs from there on out, and you get like the cheesy like kung fu poses, and he's like does like the come here as they're fighting. But a lot of cool action shots though. I think the fight choreography was really well done in this movie.
Yeah, this whole scene is very just from beginning to end, it's just nonstop. And Neo he gets some blows in, but Agent Smith is pretty much taking care of him. But Neo's just getting back up every time.
Yeah, he's just getting back up every time and just going at him. I mean, he does get some hits here and there, but you really get to see the power of their, because he's like, as he's punching and he's dodging him, he's like busting like parts of these pillars out that he's hitting and walls and stuff, throwing each other through walls. And it all culminates to like he gets Neo and he's like throws him in the middle of the train tracks and he's holding him. He's like, well, this is your inevitable demise, Mr. Anderson. He's like, now is the time that you die. And Neo just like jumps straight up into the ceiling and then backflips out of the way and barely keeps his balance as the train's going by. But he's smart enough to get the hell out of there, because as he's running out, you hear the train get stopped and another Agent Smith just immediately comes out. They just keep respawning like it's a video game. And they're just, it's just a foot chase at this point. It's just, he's running through these streets on the phone. They're telling him where to go. Now this is another part they don't really go into. My guess is it's a part of the training that they put into their heads, is like, how do they know these certain streets and where to go? Because he's like, well, go to the TV store on like corner of Market and whatever. He's like, gotcha. And he's like running there. He's like, well, how do they know where to go?
It must be because they're in the Matrix. It kind of, I don't know, they might have some sort of GPS, or they have just a different type of memory.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like a GPS, or like they downloaded the map, and like kind of similar to like how their fight training is. Maybe they downloaded the map into their brain so they know exactly where they're at.
Yeah.
But I love like as he's running throughout different parts of the city, like you see agents popping up. Like he steals the one guy's cell phone. He's like, "Hey, that's mine!" And then like the next time you see the guy, he's an agent. He like turns into the agent. When he's running through like some of the apartments, there's like a little old lady in the kitchen, and then as he's running out the door, a knife hits like the doorway, and he turns around. It's an agent that threw the knife. Yeah. But it's just like these agents just slowly taking over people as Neo's trying to get away. Almost makes it home free. As soon as he gets to the door where the phone is, as soon as he opens it up, there's an agent there, and you think that's the old end of Neo. He gets plugged like 5 times or 6 times.
He gets plugged a lot.
Yeah.
To the fact where you're just like, how is he still reacting? Like he's still like, oh, okay. And then it just gets to the point where he's just like, I'm dead. He just falls.
I just imagine like after the movie is over, you got Agent Smith like Dr. Loomis, like, I shot him 6 times. And he
disappeared.
He disappeared.
Where'd he go?
I shot him 6 times. I shot him in the heart. Can't have gotten very far. Come on. I shot him 6 times.
He stopped my bullets.
Michael!
Mr. Anderson. As if they didn't hammer it home that Neo is the Jesus of this universe enough.
Holy crap.
He gets resurrected.
I mean, listen, I think this movie is great, but this whole thing was like, oh, okay.
You didn't need it. At all.
This made me laugh out loud. Like I was like, oh, I'm just like, he becomes Jesus, who knows jiu-jitsu.
Because immediately upon being reborn, he knows he has all of his powers. He knows exactly what to do and how to do it at this point.
Yep.
And it's not even just like the cheesiness of him being resurrected and waking up like he's Jon Snow or something.
Right.
But you have as he's dead, like Trinity's talking to his lifeless body there, and she's like, the Oracle said that I would fall in love with the one and whatever. And she's like, you see, Neo, you can't die because I love you.
I was like, what?
Exactly. It's like,
what is that?
The power of love saved Neo? Is that what happened?
Oh, I don't like it.
I don't like it at all either, man. You could have found a way where, I don't know, like he gets shot maybe one time, but he's able to like push the bullet out of him like he's Wolverine or something. You could have did something like that. Or he could have immediately like just stopped the bullet with his mind as he's about to get shot. I don't know. Like as it's a sixth sense or like involuntary, like his mind automatically knows like he can stop bullets now or something. I don't know. Yeah. They could have went a different route than this, because this is just a little way too cheesy. I didn't like it.
Trinity is a badass character.
Yeah,
I thought Carrie-Anne Moss did a phenomenal job as Trinity. This was such a dumb thing to have her character do.
Yeah,
Like,
it
I love
flips
you,
the character
Neo.
on her head a little bit.
My love is going to save you. I'm like, no, let him just fight it out and, escape in his own way, not because the power of love. I'm like, what am I watching now? Am I watching a romantic comedy? What am I watching?
Where you could have, it may have worked if you would have kind of led up to it more throughout the movie instead of just like she's just there with him or like a caregiver for him. Like she gets him soup or brings him food to his room and she's just constantly there with him. But they never gave her any character development that she was like that, or she was like, because they just made her out to be this badass person that knew what she was doing and she just handles business. Whereas, and then she immediately like, oh, I'm in love with Neo. Like, it's just such
that was my prophecy. And you're like,
yeah, it's like, where did this come from? Like, we didn't get this side of you at all throughout this movie, and now it's coming out. It's very weird. It just comes off very odd at this point in time in the movie. Just, it's very like, all right, this needed to happen, so it happened type thing.
Yeah.
But of course, Neo wakes up. He's resurrected. He's the one now. And he's just fighting agents. He stops all the bullets just by putting out his hand, which is a cool effect. And then just all the bullets drop. The agent tries to fight him, and then it's just nothing now to Neo. He's fighting him with one hand.
Yeah.
He's just not even trying at this point, just fighting him off with one hand. Neo gets his own raid and dive moment because he raid and dives into Agent Smith. And he just takes over Agent Smith's body. And you get the kind of bad CGI of just his head just bulging and morphing. And then he just blows up and you see like a piece of his face just fly at the screen or whatever.
At the other agents dodge it. They're like,
and then the other agents are like, fuck this, we're leaving.
Yeah, they're like, I'm gonna just go. I want nothing to do with that.
Yeah, I'm out at this point.
It was a great reaction because they don't say anything. They just look and they see it all happen. They dodge the piece and they just go. Yep. And they just run.
Just peace. And I think they both go different directions too. Yeah. Like, nope. But it's kind of cool because you know that Neo has control over the Matrix now, because after he busts out, he like flexes and like you see like the Matrix like vibrate, I guess.
Yep.
Like he has control over the Matrix now at this point. As all of this is going on, back on the ship, they're getting just terrorized by the actual Sentinels too,
which are terrifying.
Yeah, the Sentinels are onto them. They're slowly just ripping apart the ship to get inside to kill them.
Yeah.
And they do have an EMP, but they can't push the button until Neo comes out, or else it's going to shut everything down and he's going to die within the Matrix. But of course, as these movies tend to do, it's a last second thing. They pull him out right when they push the button. And that shuts down all the machines in that given area. They're able to repair the ship. And the movie just kind of ends at that point. You don't really get any any closure with those characters after they bring Neo out at all. You just kind of get that system failure screen with the code, which makes you think that the Matrix is somewhat shut down, I guess. But they talk about like what it's like to live free with like no boundaries and such. So it makes you think that they got rid of the agents and stuff, but the story is far from over. It's very vague about how they're dealing with the end of the movie here, because you don't really get a wrap up with like Morpheus or Trinity or anything like that. As soon as they pull Neo out and they hit the EMP, goes to that system failure, and then it's right back into the Matrix. Neo's on the phone.
Yeah.
And now Neo can fly.
Yeah. And then we get some Rage Against the Machine.
Yeah, and no better song than Wake Up. But you don't really know who Neo's on the phone with either. Like, did he get jacked in and then he's just talking to Morpheus or Neo? Is he talking to the Oracle? Who's he talking to on this phone?
I feel like he was talking to.
Or he's just talking to us. He's just
I feel like he was talking to the agents, maybe, because he's talking about, it's like, you guys disappeared. You guys are hiding. I know you're out there somewhere.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's very vague on like who he's talking to, because no one's talking back. It's just kind of a message.
Yeah, it's just
that typical end of movie narration.
Yeah,
and a lot of movies from the time.
It's something you would normally have just a voiceover like at the end of a movie, whereas instead it's just him on the phone talking to somebody. You don't know who it is. And then immediately just comes out as the music starts playing, puts cool shades on.
And they're crooked. They're not even on straight. He looks like a goofball. He puts them on and they're kind of like cockeyed. And I'm like, oh, no one noticed this.
They only did one take. And they're like,
he's just putting on his glasses. Why do we need to do more than one take?
And they're like, shit, maybe we should have done more than one take.
He looks like such a goofball.
And I noticed that too, because as I was researching, apparently all the sunglasses and stuff were custom made for each actor. Whereas they all look cool except for Neo's. Neo's, whenever you see them close up, they look oversized and look like they're just hanging on his face.
They look like old lady glasses that they like spray painted black because it's got like the wings the slight wings on the ends.
Yeah,
like,
and they just look
kind
of comically big for his face.
Yeah.
And like you were saying at the end, they're just kind of crooked and they just look just weird. And that's just a tight close shot of his face.
The funny thing is, you look at the poster for this movie,
it's
and
different glasses, I think. Isn't
it? They look. I mean, the image is kind of small, but they look better.
Yeah, I have the poster up on the screen for anybody that wants to see it. But yeah, they look good on the poster and everything.
Yeah,
but in the movie, like during the action, yeah. And I was always curious on how he has them on his face, but whenever they're leaving the oracles, you do see that he like pinches them to put them on his nose. So there's like some sort of like spring that keeps him on his nose.
Yeah.
But I was always curious, like how the hell do those glasses stay on all the time, especially during like fight scenes and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, you get a cool end of the movie. Neo can fly. He flies right up into the camera as Rage Against the Machine just starts blaring, which is a great song for the end of the movie here.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, that's the end of the movie, man. That's the Matrix. Now the question is, does it hold up all these years later?
Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
This movie, like I said before the whole plot breakdown, this movie just rocks. Watching this as I watched this when I was probably 11 or 12. And now I'm, in my 30s, and I watch this, and I'm just like, I think it's easier for me to understand certain things, and it was like, oh wow, this isn't as confusing as I thought it was. Like I was ready to go into this like, oh boy, like I got my 10-year-old son asking me questions, and I'm just like, I don't even know. But then as the movie progresses, and they literally sit you down, they're like, all right, this is what's happening. This is not difficult. You'll understand. And I was like, I do understand, movie.
Thank you.
But no, this movie's awesome. The action is great. The visual effects are good for the time. Yes, there are some shots where you're like, ooh, that doesn't age very well. But the innovation in the things that they were doing in this movie that had never been done before, bullet time, which is now huge in cinema. I mean, they don't do it as much anymore, but this movie just does. I mean, the characters are all great. I didn't like that Joey Pants. Joey Pants, yeah. That he was the bad guy. I love him in Bad Boys. He's like one of my favorite characters in that movie.
Yeah.
But like he's the bad guy, and I was like, oh man, of all the people. But no, I thought everyone was great. Keanu Reeves, proving to the world that he's not just that, stoner goofball from Bill and Ted's. I mean, like I said before, he had done Speed, which he was great in. He did Point Break, which he was great in. But like this really made him an action superstar.
Oh yeah. He's become pretty much since. That he's continued to be pretty much since, especially with like these John Wick movies and stuff that are coming out, which are awesome. Which probably wouldn't have John Wick if it wasn't for the Matrix and a lot of these movies that are out there today.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you were saying, I totally agree with you about, Cypher, like Joey Pants' character. I think it would have worked better if you would have had more of a lead up to it. Like if you would have been like, all right, because they only really mention it one or two times, like, all right, there's a mole or there's an informant somewhere, but you don't know who it is. But instead, like as soon as Neo meets up with everybody, that's where you pretty much get the scene with Joey Pants and Agent Smith. There really isn't much mystery behind it through the course of the movie. They didn't draw it out enough where like, oh yeah, it's him. That's a surprise.
Slow build.
Yeah.
Where there wasn't a slow build. It was like that conversation that him and Neo have, and then, oh hey, now he's with Agent Smith. You're like,
where you're talking, where they're having that conversation. You're like, all right, this is kind of shady. There's something up about him. And then the next scene is him, with Agent Smith, where it just confirms it. Yeah, where if you would have spaced it out a little bit, you would have been like, there isn't something right about him, but we'll see as the movie goes on. I think it would have worked a little bit better, but I completely agree with you there. The acting in it is great. There is some cheesy lines throughout, of course, especially like the resurrection stuff with Trinity there in the end. By far, I think my favorite though is just Morpheus and Lawrence Fishburne just taking that character and making it his own. Just all the dialogue and the monologues that he has explaining the universe and like the one and just all the exposition itself. He does such a great job with it.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I completely agree. It definitely holds up, even more so now. I think on the 4K, they actually did clean up some of the special effects a little bit. They did look a little better as I was watching it than what I remember them being, or maybe I'm just misremembering them. Or else they just looked that good at the time. But I fully agree. This movie does still hold up. Now, normally on the show, I do like would you recommend it as a buy it, rent it, or a miss it type movie?
This is a classic. I mean, and we can say that this movie's 20 plus years old.
Yeah.
I don't own this movie, but I might actually go out and buy this. I mean, this is a movie that is, some would consider one of the the greatest action movies ever made.
Yeah.
100%. I think you should buy it. At least this one. Or, if there's a deal going on with all of them, sure. I've never, like I said, I have never seen any of the other Matrix, but I would buy it.
Yeah. Yeah, I would 100% for sure recommend buying this movie. It is a must-have if you're a fan of action movies. It's an amazing movie. It's definitely one of my favorites. It's one of those ones I've had. It's one of those movies I have to get on each medium whenever they come out with something different. Like I don't think I had it on VHS back in the day, but I did have it on DVD. I bought it on Blu-ray and then ended up getting it on 4K. Just because it's just one of those movies I always have to get the updated version for. But I would definitely highly recommend this movie, especially this first one. I can't really say the same about the other three now. I would say I mean, we'll get to those eventually, but I have my quarrels with the other three movies in the series. But for sure, this first one will stand the test of time as one of the greatest action movies, though.
Oh, yeah.
Well, hopefully, maybe at some point we can bring you back on and talk about maybe Matrix Reloaded if you want down the line, since you haven't seen any of the other sequels.
I would be on board to do it.
All right. So where can everybody find you here, man?
You could find us at Dissect That Film on all the social medias. We are on all of the podcast services. We're on YouTube. I have social media links as well. You can find me personally at Parker Dissects on Twitter, Instagram, and actually those are the only two because I don't do much for social on my own. It's mostly just for the show. But yeah, we're everywhere. Just type in Dissect That Film wherever you listen to your podcast, and we're probably going to be there. And if we're not, message me and we'll get it on there.
Yeah, and I'll make sure to put you guys' links in the description of this video as well. That way anybody can go check out your channel and pages whenever they like. 'Cause you guys got a lot of great content over there.
Thank you.
Yeah. And as for us, of course, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Make sure to go follow us on the Cinema Trip Reviews channel and follow us at Twitter at Cinema Trip Views on Twitter. Couldn't fit the reviews part in there. You only have a certain amount of characters.
Oh, yeah.
So it's at Cinema Trip Views on Twitter. And that's a review for this week. We'll see everybody next time.